Welcome to Revolutionary Gardener. My name is Adabu and I'm a farmer currently living in Southern Ontario. Most of my experience is based in organic farming with vegetables and fruits within small towns, mostly in Ontario and BC. But my favorite and most inspiring farm experiences have been in Toronto and with doing urban agriculture. So I lived there for years in an apartment that had a decent patio and windows that allowed me to grow indoor plants, but then on the patio I'd also grow seasonal vegetables. On the kind of like little amount of space that I had, I was able to grow quite a lot of fresh produce and flowers and herbs and all kinds of stuff. So for me that was a special opportunity to have that. I know a lot of people in the city don't have outdoor space to grow plants, but even with a little bit of sunlight or window space inside, you can actually do quite a lot. So I was very grateful to grow plants while I was in the city, because for me, gardening isn't just about growing plants for the sake of growing plants or for their beauty, but it's also about learning about those plants and the seeds and the soil and the land and the histories and stories that go along with all of those things. And especially in the city within Toronto and within most cities, you can find so many diverse cultures of people from around the world. And they all carry their own knowledge and experiences and relationships and connections to plants, food, land, and soil. And so for me, the city, the urban space is really a special place for growing because of all those connections that can be made between people and nature and the histories of all cultures and diversities that gather within urban centers. So from thinking about all those things that come up, that you can, all those connections that you can make through gardening and farming, I decided to make a video series called The Revolutionary Gardener, because for me, gardening and farming has been revolutionary and an act of resistance within a world that has really worked to disconnect people from land and plants and nature, and even like a lot of times like people aren't connected to where their food comes from. So for me, I've always thought about how historically and even today around the world, people grow their own food and they have relationships with the land and with the soil and the seeds and with the animals, and all the kind of interconnections that are happening that make nature survive, but also is the source of our food, of our products that we need to sustain our lives. So I've noticed how, especially in North America, within the food system that we have, so many of us are really disconnected from where our food comes from, how our food is grown, who's growing our food, and that's really something important for me. Like the things that we ingest, the things that we eat on a daily basis are our source of life, and for me it's important to know how that food is getting to our stores, to our plates, and the more that we know, the more we can connect to the food that we, not only the food that we eat, but the land that we live on and the stories of the people who are part of the process of getting us our food. So I created this series to talk about all those aspects of gardening that I've come to realize within my own kind of experiences, and then also to show people that planting seeds and making something grow is actually very, very easy and fun, and it's really fulfilling. It's very satisfying to be working with the soil and to watch the seeds that you plant grow into this incredible entity that then provides you nutrients. It provides a source of cleansing the air. It provides odors if you're growing flowers or herbs, and these can all be really healing they can be a source of education, a source of knowledge. These plants can provide just a relative, like a nice environment for you to exist in. With, if they're in your home, they can completely change the vibe in your own home. And then, yeah, the act of actually growing that yourself and teaching that to your children or to your community members is also an incredible skill to be able to have and to share with people. So today I would like to start this series, The Revolutionary Gardener, with a video, this video of how to grow something with recycled goods. So I kind of noticed that we as human beings and societies today create so much garbage. We buy almost all of our things come in plastic packaging or cardboard boxes or whatever it is. They come in some sort of container that we then throw away just after we consume whatever was in it. And so from kind of understanding like that we as human beings, we contribute to so much of the pollution that degrades our environment, that we can also be part of the solution to all that pollution and actually kind of rethink and reimagine the way that we interact with material objects and the way that we think about what is waste. And we can use and we can actually start to use different products within our own environments to actually regenerate life by growing plants in those objects. So I decided to make a video about how you can use recycled objects that almost all of us would probably find in our home, and use those as containers to plant seeds and to grow vegetables or plants of any kind. So I thought I would demonstrate that. Not only is gardening amazingly easy, anybody can do it. Anyone can plant a seed and water it and watch it grow, but it can be very cheap. You can do it with really minimal resources, and all you really need is a few key ingredients, and you can grow whatever you want to, really. So no matter if you have a lawn or if you have outdoor space, or you don't, whether or not you have the fancy pots that you see at stores that usually cost around $15 to $25, you don't necessarily need all those things to grow plants. You can use all sorts of materials to make things happen. So that's what this video is about, and I hope you all enjoy it. For drainage, you need holes. So we're making some holes in these containers in order that the water doesn't stay in the soil and rot the roots or drown the seeds. So as long as you have a little bit of drainage, you're good to go. So you see there we have some holes. So you see here we've made some holes in the bottom of here, and I'm going to use the lid that came with the fruit tray as a water catcher. So you want a water tray underneath each of your containers to catch any water that will drain out of the holes. so you don't want to get your tables or surfaces or floors wet. So now we have all our materials and we're ready to start planting. Okay, so here you can see we have filled up our container, not too full, so that when you water it, the water doesn't spill over the edge. It'll sink down and drain out nicely in the holes we poked in the bottom into the tray. Lastly, we have here an interesting type of planter that we made out of the bottle. So you cut the water bottle in half, you poke holes in the lid, and you keep the lid on, actually, not too tight. And then this part will fill with water. I've just got a water bottle here. You just fill that with water. Usually you'd fill it up. And then this part, the top half, you fill with soil. So then you've got something like this. You have the top half filled with soil. And then actually what you do is you put one inside the other, the top half into the bottom half. And what will happen is that the water that you put into the bottom will actually soak up through the lid. So you see here, the water will soak up through the lid, and you've got yourself a kind of self-watering device. That way you don't really have to be too concerned about keeping an eye on your soil and its dryness, and it's a perfectly good way of making sure that your plant gets enough water. Then you just have to make sure that when your bottom half gets low, then you refill it, and just keeps going like that. So now that we have our 3 compartments here, and this is the tray that I'm using as a water catcher for this container, we can start planting our seeds. So for me personally, my favorites that I'm gonna plant today are the hot peppers. Orange habanero hot pepper we have here, the bush beans, and some tomatoes, some heirloom tomatoes. These are organic seeds, and then these are, I think these are just heirloom seeds, not necessarily organic, which is fine. Any seed will do. Any seed is perfectly good. I'm not too concerned about that. More so I'm concerned about what you do with your plants afterwards, not using pesticides and all kinds of, synthetic fertilizers and stuff that is actually contaminating the soil. And the pesticides are really bad for insects, and you actually want lots of insects to be in your garden for helping to help the plants grow. So we will do some planting. We're gonna start with the habanero peppers, some of my favorite, very hot pepper. And peppers really like a lot of heat and a lot of sunlight. So when you start with these seeds, you'll notice that they're extremely tiny. They're very, very small. And one seed will go a long ways. So I'm gonna plant some habanero seeds in here. And really what you want to do is you just want to make a small little indent in the soil, put the seed down, and then cover it lightly and pat it down so that when you water it, the seed doesn't just get exposed. And I'm gonna put maybe three seeds per compartment in this one. And this is just a starting point, so I'm gonna do 3 and 3. So I'm not gonna actually keep these plants once they get a little bigger, once they start growing. I'm not actually gonna keep them in here forever, because as they grow, the roots need more and more space. So at that point, then you have to do what's called transplanting, which basically just means that you take the the plant, once it's kind of filled out its little pot, you take it and you put it in a bigger pot, which means you need more soil and all that. And usually if you have outdoor space, that's when you would kind of put them outside so that they can get wind and direct sunlight. Wind makes a plant stronger. So next we'll do some bush beans. For me, I love bush beans. They grow very easily. They don't require a lot of maintenance, and you can harvest from them many times throughout a season. So bush beans are one of my particular favorites, and I'm going to put them also in this same kind of compartment, in the same tray. And for these, the bigger the seed, the deeper you want it in the soil, and the bigger the seed, the more space you want for it to grow. So I'm only going to put 2 seeds in each compartment for the beans. And usually what you want to do is you want to take a little maybe popsicle stick or a plastic spoon or something and label what is where, so that you don't forget what plant is what. And then for this, I'm gonna put 2 tomato seeds. And we'll see how that goes. Tomatoes are one of those plants that really need a lot of space and heavy duty. They need a lot of nutrients in the soil. So it's great to start them indoors. And you can start them in any little container. You can use any size container really. You could use a small yogurt container. You could use a can. Not necessarily, maybe not a tuna can, but like a can of beans or whatever. So I'm going to put 2 tomatoes in here. Tomato seeds. And hope for the best. And then in here I think I'll start some basil. Basil is also very easy to grow. Basil is kind of one of those nice plants. It's an herb that you can continue to grow indoors. You don't have to put it outside. Well, any of these. Tomato really needs a lot of heat. And so do peppers. Peppers need a lot of heat and direct sunlight, so those kind of things you probably want to put outside. But with basil plants and cilantro or parsley, like those kinds of herbs, the kind of light herbs, are really good for growing indoors. So I'm going to put some basils in here. The seeds are very small, like very minuscule. So you gotta be careful not to lose them. And in that case, I kind of just make a little trench and drop them in, kind of sprinkle them in. And then when they start growing, I'll have to kind of take them, I'll empty them out of this container and put them in a bigger, maybe planted box or something like that. But basil is kind of one of those things that likes to grow in bushes. So it grows into sort of a bushy plant, and they like to be planted together. Whereas sage and lavender, these are kind of these are herbs that come back every year, so they're better planted outside, but you can also keep them as indoor plants. But they really need a big pot, and for those you wouldn't necessarily plant a whole bunch of them in one compartment like I did here with the basil, because you don't want to mess with the roots too much once they start growing. So that's the planting, and now we're ready to water. Okay, so here we have our water. You just want to do it very gently. If you fill it too much, or if you just dump it in, then it'll kind of splash up and it'll disturb the seeds. So right now you can see the water is sinking down, and you want to give it just enough. And same with these. We'll just do a light watering. And this is going to get the seeds started pretty quickly, and then in a couple days, maybe about 3-4 days, you'll probably start to see some little green seedlings starting to sprout from the soil, and those are your seeds germinating and starting to grow. So the next step after this, I'm going to put some soil on these from the top. Even though there's water from the bottom, the soil hasn't been watered yet, so we want to make sure that we start off the soil as starting moist, and then from then it'll continue to soak up the water from the bottom. So I'm going to fill up the compartment in the bottom a bit more. You don't want to fill it up too much, because then when you put this part in, it'll push the water out and it'll overflow. So you really just want enough. You can kind of see there the bottom is in the water. So that's that. As long as you have your water trays there, you can see the water's kind of coming out the bottom. It'll keep your surfaces dry. And a good way to know whether your soil is too dry is you stick your finger in the top part. If it's not moist, about a 1/2 inch, about this much space if it's dry within the top layer, about that much space, then your soil needs watering. But if you kind of brush the top and it feels moist, then it's probably good to go. It's better to keep the soil a bit on the dry side rather than overwater, because then your seeds will drown, or your plant roots will start to rot once they start growing. You don't want to overwater, because your roots will suffer. So the next step is just to put your planters near the window, and you're good to go. I'm just gonna leave these here by the window, and as long as they get some sunlight, then we're good. And you got some happy seeds in there. So I hope you all learned something, and I hope you can all agree with me that gardening is fun, it's easy, it's educational. There's a lot you can gain from it personally. There's a lot of therapeutic benefits to gardening, to feeling soil, to being outside. If you want to take this activity outdoors, it's you can transfer it outside. Of course not now. Right now we're doing it. It's still quite cold out, so you don't want to put your plants outside. But if you were to be planting in the summertime, even if you're in the city and you want to go do it at the park, it's very fun to just kind of play around with gardening in different spaces. And yeah, I hope that from this experience we can kind of move forward and rethinking how we see recycled objects. We've used a juice box, a wine carton, and a fruit tray now to make planters. There's 3 objects that many of us have in our households. There's cans, there's all sorts of different containers that we get, all of our different foods and material objects come in packaging all the time. So I hope that this can kind of be an eye-opener as to how we can reimagine waste products and start to really actually take into practice that whole reuse aspect of the reuse, recycle, and renew objects. And I think for me, reusing stuff is really important, because a lot of these products can be used for really, really useful purposes. From here, I would like to let you all know that the next video coming out will be about transplanting once the seeds that we've now planted start to kind of grow and get a little bit bigger. A lot of them will need to be put into larger pots, and so the next video I would like to put out will be about larger containers that you can use, larger recycled containers that you can use, and the process of taking a plant from its original container and putting it into a bigger container, what that looks like, and from there we can continue moving on through the season of how to care for your plants, whether indoors or outdoors. There's topics I'd like to cover, such as the health benefits of plants, what different types of medicinal plants and edible plants there are out there that you can use, the benefits of flowers, both indoors and outdoors, and then there's so many topics that can come up within this very specific topic, this very simple topic of gardening. So I would also like to hear from you all as viewers what you're interested in hearing about, what you're interested in learning, and to make this more of a kind of a communal project that we work on together, where we communicate and we learn from each other. So that's my hope with this project, and I hope you enjoyed it all. And we'll see you next time. Take care.